Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I'm your hostess, Lisa Winton. With me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the progression one experiences when graduating from thinking truth to talking truth to being truth. Listen as we discuss the hero's journey consisting of the separation, the journey, and the return to parallel the three phases in human development, leading to divine realization. In this show, we will focus on the path of knowledge as a practice for preparing the way to the light of truth. To darkness are they doomed who devote themselves only to life in the world, and to greater darkness they who devote themselves only to meditation, from the Isha Upanishad. Also Luke 16:10, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and be divine truth only. Swami, the title of today's show is Living as the Divine Self. What does that mean to you?
Well, we've been really learning we have to stop living in two worlds. The idea in the Bible where Jesus says you can't serve two masters. We're learning that you can't be a finite mortal being and also be an eternal spiritual being. And because the divine self, the eternal spiritual being, is the only truth, we have to let go of the belief in the false, material, limited, mental, physical concept. The lead-in I have here is a reading from Herb Fitch, La Jolla Series 1A. I'll read it. Only God is here. Now, there is nothing in this world that is going to change that. There is no event in the entire world that can ever change that truth. That's why we're using it. It's a truth. It doesn't change. Only God is here. Think of what would happen to you if you knew that so well that regardless of what the world showed forth, you could face it with a smile and even with deep joy knowing why only God is here. If a person walks into the room where you are, does that mean God leaves the room? No, nothing changes. If a person walks out of the room, same thing, nothing changes. What we're saying then is you are not to store this fact on a shelf in your memory. You must learn how to know this consciously. End of quote. That's what we're talking about, going from talking about being spiritual to living out from your divine self in the truth of your being and starting to understand spirit is a demonstrable principle. It is a truth. It is a law. And when we are conscious of it, it has a profound effect on whatever it is that we're experiencing.
So let's discuss the first line of the summary when we talked about progression one experiences when graduating from thinking truth to talking truth and to being truth.
As we progress in educating thought up to spiritual apprehension, we come to a crossroad where we either turn back or we continue thinking about divine truth, or we turn left and begin talking about divine truth. But what we really want to do is rise and accept spiritual identity. If and when we decide to rise, you must begin to practice incorporeality. And in some way, you must separate from physical identity and accept an astral identity. we graduate from a physical identity into a mental concept of ourselves. That's the progression that we're talking about. And for us to focus on the how-to, we're going to refer back to what was said in the Isha Upanishad. To darkness are they doomed who devote themselves only to life in the world, and to greater darkness they who devote themselves only to meditation. Yoga is not going to be just about doing, and it's not going to be just about knowing. It's going to be the coordinating of knowing and doing. It reminds me of the Martha Wilcox lesson. To be faithful and orderly with the objects of sense in order to be receptive to the deeper things of divine truth, which she got from Luke 16:10. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in the much. In order to accept spiritual identity, we really must know ourselves in the way that we are known by the Creator. We must know ourselves spiritually. But as Mary Baker Eddy said on page 349 in Science and Health, mortal thought does not at once catch the higher meaning, and can do so only as thought is educated up to spiritual apprehension. To a certain extent, this is equally true of all learning, even that which is wholly material. End of quote. In order for us to go from knowing to doing to being the divine self, we want to understand that there is going to be a certain progression here. Like we said, the hero's journey, the separation, the journey, the return. There are these phases in development. By working with what is visible and tangible, your physical body, you're working with the comprehensive clues that are most evident to your corporeal senses. But then as we move from physical to astral mental, you're graduating from what is visible and tangible to that which is invisible but tangible. And that's a stepping stone. As our identity shifts from physical to astral, it reminds me of going to a base camp on a mountain climb, say, for example, to Mount Everest. People that climb Mount Everest take almost 12 days to get to the base camp. And the same with living in your divine self. The Bible says, put off the old man. Or Jesus says, unless you be born again of spirit and water. These are all words in a book. And what is it going to look like when I am making this transition, shifting my identity from physical to mental to eventually spiritual identity, to be one with the divine creative principle?
Well, Swami, I think that there's a lot of people out there who think truth, they talk the truth, but then being truth, I think, is an entirely different ball of wax here. So living as a divine self, to do that, we have to practice this incorporeality that you had mentioned. So what exactly does that look like when we practice incorporeality to get to the point where we're living as the divine self?
Yeah, I think to maybe expand on what you're talking about here, I have something from Herb Fitch, Fourth Dimension, Class 14B. I'll read it. You cannot accept your immortal self and not accept your immortal, infinite, universal body. You don't have a personal body to take care of. And the miracle of having nothing and yet being able to give everything, as Jesus demonstrated, is the same with your body. The miracle of accepting and living in the knowledge of your infinite body is what takes care of what you have called your personal body. End of quote. And Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures makes a similar point on page 265, and I'll read it. Man understands spiritual existence in proportion as his treasure of truth and love are enlarged. Mortals must gravitate Godward. Their affections and aims grow spiritual. They must near the broader interpretation of being and gain some proper sense of the infinite in order that sin and mortality may be put off. End of quote. learning about this infinite spiritual body is, I think, an important piece in this concept. And I'll continue with what Herb Fitch was saying in Fourth Dimension 14b, and I'll read it. Now, you can read the Bible from cover to cover, and you can read every book of Joel's from cover to cover, and you're still going to have to do it yourself. You'll have to come into that secret place where you and you alone, without mother, brother, father, or sister, sit down and dwell in the knowledge that my body has no beginning and no ending. My body is everywhere. It is the Spirit of God without beginning and end, the Alpha and the Omega. And because it is the Spirit of God, my body is a perfect body. And the instant you decide that you do not have a perfect body in some way, you are denying the truth of your infinite body, which is the perfect body of God. End of quote. And so as we educate our thought upward, out of the belief in the many, into an understanding of a oneness, to have an astral image, we use the zodiac, we use the chakras in yoga. In Revelations, they use the churches. But if you have a larger image that will enable you to get your sense of self out of a physical location into a larger image, it becomes the base camp for the climb. Mary Baker Eddy talked about in Unity of Good, she mentions Ralph Waldo Emerson suggests that we hitch our wagon to a star. That's exactly what we have been trying to do, is lift our personal sense of self into a larger astral image, which includes the zodiac, which means this newer, larger sense of self is one body. It's the same body for everybody. But again, it's a mental image, and like Mary Baker Eddy says in her work, what we really want to do is identify with the divine creative principle, with the spiritual light. And I understand that, but this gives us a stepping stone, a progression, a way of coming out of a physical body into an astral mental body. That would be what I would consider to be a practice of incorporeality.
So we have to begin with the realization we are not a physical body. We have to have that realization that we have a God body, if you will.
Yeah, a spirit body or a causal spiritual body, a divine self. And to start to shift and live out from the awareness of your divine self. Because I really like what Herb said. Only God is here. If you are in constant relation with the divine idea, only divine truth is here. Granted, it's invisible, it's intangible, it doesn't report in my material senses, but if I am conscious of it, remember, consciousness is experience, and the outer world of sense and the inner world of spirit become one when divine truth is your only consciousness. And then what we're saying is spirit is a demonstrable principle. And so you learn that this becomes a practical guide for highly effective living by keeping your mind in constant relation with divine truth.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Swami, I think we should take some time and talk about the hero's journey that consists of the separation, the journey, and the return that parallel the 3 phases of human development. I know we've done many shows on that. Can you give us a summary and understanding of what we're talking about?
Yeah, the phases in development where we go from unconscious awareness to self-conscious awareness to superconscious awareness parallels the metamorphosis of a butterfly. Butterflies aren't born butterflies, they're born caterpillars. Caterpillars are insects in the larvae state. They do nothing but indulge. And so humans in the larvae state, we're careless, we're emotional, we're indulgent, we're excitable. The caterpillar then goes into a chrysalis. In the chrysalis, the caterpillar shuts off the instincts and the appetites of the body. And so the human, when we are in the chrysalis phase, we are abstinent. We're careful, intelligent, ambitious, but we are no longer reacting to the testimony of our senses. From the chrysalis, the caterpillar then emerges as a butterfly. The butterfly has options, caterpillars don't. And the same is true with humans. When we graduate to the adult state, we're carefree, wise, liberated, we're enthusiastic. But we also have the capacity to navigate through, just like a butterfly has more options than a caterpillar. We can navigate through these additional dimensions of consciousness. But we can't go from caterpillar to butterfly without this middle piece, without being abstinent, careful, intelligent, ambitious. What Martha Wilcox learned, what Mary Baker Eddy taught her. We must be faithful and orderly with the objects of sense. So the Bible says put off the old man doesn't mean we dismiss. We have this false physical sense of self, because what we've been saying is that's the check engine light on your consciousness. What's going to give you the visible clues as to, am I sowing to the flesh or am I sowing to the spirit? Without it, you can fall into the trap of what in yoga they call avidya. In the Bible, they call it sin. We mistake the false for the real, which collectively, I would say that's exactly where humanity is today. We think the physical body is real. And the entire medical model is trying to figure out how the unreal became real. And then we work on preserving it, protecting it, and improving it. Whereas the truth is right here, but we're completely unconscious to it. Because just like Herb Fitch said, the instant you decide that you do not have a perfect body in some way, you are denying the truth of your infinite body. And then also what he had said is we must have knowledge of this infinite spiritual body. Mary Baker Eddy said a proper sense of the infinite. In Kriya Yoga, we use a chakra system, which can be converted into the 7 personal planets. Now, as you're elevating your thought up to this spiritual apprehension, in Revelations, it's the woman who has the moon below her feet and is clothed in the sun. This astral body, as you start to lift your awareness into it, is a larger sense of self. It gets you out of the belief in the many into a invisible but tangible concept of the one. And then that becomes your stepping stone. From there, you want to make the quantum leap into spiritual identity, living in your divine self, one perfect divine light, looking at itself, as itself, of itself, and to itself.
Swami, can you discuss with us in a little bit more detail the hero's journey? Maybe who is a good example of what that looked like?
Well, I think one of the great examples of the hero's journey was the life of Jesus, with the crucifixion of the body, the resurrection of the Son, and the reunion with the Father. In mythology, there's stories of Odysseus coming home from the Trojan War, or the labors and tasks of Hercules. These were all ways of mapping out this progression. We have to become these, and I really like what Herb Fitch says in Boulder Creek, and I think it's class 5, where he talks about spiritual astronauts. We have to become physically capable of being able to make this transition, to live in this higher consciousness, this different frequency. And just like an astronaut has to go through physical training to condition themselves to things that we're not familiar with, that's where the yoga for me comes in, where you're working with your physical body, the shape, the composition, the condition of your body, how the segments of your body line up, the range of motion you have at the articulations. There is a procedure to what we call asana, which means posture. To be in perfect posture is to be in a position where your muscles and bones are in synergy. When the bones support you internally and the muscles relax is asana, it's posture. Now, if you don't have this and you don't work with the procedure and the intention of a particular posture, then what we learn is practice makes perfect only when practice is perfect. Because if you do a forward bend with a posterior tilt to the pelvis, then you can never achieve the goal of the posture, which is to lengthen the muscles in the backs of the legs so you can roll the pelvis over the femurs and lengthen the spine, rather than just compressing the spine, trying to get your hands closer to the floor. But this is what Martha Wilcox learned: to be faithful and orderly with the objects of sense makes us receptive to the deeper things of divine truth. And in a meditative position, when you are sitting and your bones are supporting you internally, then you are in alignment and your body is able to resonate to the frequencies that we want to be receptive to.
It almost sounds like some of this path of action. Like I would think a asana program would be like a path of action, but it's also a large part of a path of knowledge as well, as we stated in the summary, to use it as this way to prepare the way to the light of the truth.
Well, I think everything that we do in yoga is that compilation, combining and coordinating action, knowledge, and devotion. And it's applied across the board. Yes, physical exercises when you're doing a physical posture, but you're not just trying to get your hand to the floor or your foot on your head. The posture has procedure and intention. The other thing is there's this whole internal mental component that must be in place. The idea of keeping your mind in constant relation with the divine idea, where you're stopping thinking and you're starting to know the truth. And as you're lifting your identity from this false image that's on the mat into even, say, for example, this larger sense of self, which is associated with the zodiacal signs that we work through, you're lifting your sense of self from physical to astral mental. But you don't want to stop there. You want to keep your mind in constant relation with the divine idea. It's a seamless fit when you're going from astral awareness of a one infinite body into the truth of your spiritual body.
So that sounds like a good lead-in to some notes we have here by Mary Baker Eddy.
This is from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 14, and I'll read it. Become conscious for a single moment that life and intelligence are purely spiritual, neither in nor of matter, and the body will then utter no complaints. If suffering from a belief in sickness, you will find yourself suddenly well. Sorrow is turned into joy when the body is controlled by spiritual life, truth, and love. Hence, the hope of the promise Jesus bestows. He that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also, because I go unto my Father. because the ego is absent from the body and present with the truth and love. The Lord's Prayer is the prayer of soul, not of material sense. End of quote. Yeah, the idea of living as the divine self, shifting your identity from a physical body to an astral mental body, and then eventually into the causal spiritual body. That is a quantum leap. And we must educate ourselves so that we begin to know, well, what would that look like if I was living as the divine self? Because life is perfect. We can also refer to the way it starts in the Isha Upanishad. I'll read it. In the heart of all things, of whatever there is in the universe, dwells the Lord. He alone is the reality. Wherefore, renouncing vain appearances, rejoice in him. Covet no man's wealth. Well may he be content to live 100 years who acts without attachment, who works his work with earnestness, but without desire, not yearning for its fruits, he and he alone. End of quote. And we really have to start to understand what they mean by vain appearances. What is appearing in our 5 material senses is the false sense of existence. And we are stopping forming thoughts and opinions based on that information, and we're starting to activate spiritual sense. We want to see the truth. We want to know the truth. We don't just want to talk about it. We want to be the truth. By being conscious of this divine creation, the perfection of being, we'll take care of what seems to be a personal physical body. Further on in the Isha Upanishad, there's even more clues that they give us. I'll read some of them. Life in the world alone leads to one result. Meditation alone leads to another. So have we heard from the wise. They who devote themselves both to life in the world and to meditation, by life in the world overcome death, and by meditation achieve immortality. End of quote. These are really great clues, and it's a hint in how to come out of the belief that I am a finite mortal being and accept and start living in the divine self, the one perfect divine life. The only thing that is here, the light of truth, the light of spiritual reality.
Swami, the verse that you had said just a few minutes ago, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, because I go unto my Father. I just have a curiosity about the first part, he that believeth on me. I think that's interesting that it uses the word on and not in me. Any thoughts about that?
Well, when Jesus is speaking, he's really talking from your divine self. He's talking from the Christ. It might even be more like it is the Christ that is speaking through Jesus, which is what we want to start to do, is be receptive to this divine truth, which is right here and right now, pouring out its wisdom. When we start to understand Scripture and the life of Jesus more as the manifestation of the Christ made visible, and then you begin to understand the same Christ that was speaking through Jesus is the same Christ that is animating me at this time. But we can't do it from a personal sense of I. We can't do it with the mind that is creating the false sense of existence. We have to, like the Bible said, repent, think differently. We've got to graduate from thinking with these material senses and starting to live our lives out from our spiritual sense. And when Jesus says about, I go unto my Father, I and the Father are one, the realization that there is only one life. Spirit is whole, it's complete. It can't be divided. There's only one spirit. And the minute we divide it, if there's me and, then we're in this lower life stream. We're back in duality. We have divided the unified state of being whole and complete.
Well, it's that time to break down the show for today, so listeners be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, you see the fading banner Blog Talk Radio. Clicking that directs you to its catalog page, and then don't forget clicking the products tab, online classes, directs you to all the classes that Swami has available. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and be divine truth only. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton, with me, Kenny Toy, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.